All right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. So today we're tackling Abraham, but, and here's the twist, we're moving past the usual, the faith and obedience stuff.
Right.
We're going deeper. Our source is this sermon. It's called Abraham, Wealth, Leadership, and God's Glory. And it's got me thinking, was all that prosperity, all those blessings just like material? Or was there a bigger picture? Did Abraham's wealth actually connect to fulfilling God's purpose?
Hmm. That's a great question. It really makes you think. The sermon starts off strong, emphasizing that everything Abraham had, all that wealth, came directly from God.
Yeah.
Genesis 13, it paints this picture of his flocks and herds, and silver the guy was loaded.
Oh.
But here's where it gets interesting. The text then throws a curveball.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the curveball?
All that wealth, it actually caused some serious tension. With Lot, his nephew.
Ah, right. Lot. Too much of a good thing, I guess.
Exactly. Genesis 13.6 even says, straight up, the land couldn't support both their herds.
Wow. I can only imagine, right? Two huge family herds, probably some, competitive herders, tension over every watering hole. I'd be stressed out.
Oh, for sure. It's a recipe for conflict.
So how did Abraham handle this? This could have blown up big time.
He did something pretty incredible. He chose to be generous. Instead of, clinging to what he had, he let Lot pick first.
Wow. Seriously.
Yeah. And of course, Lot, being Lot, went for the best stuff, the lush Jordan plains. Abraham, on the other hand, he moved his tents. That's what the text says, towards the Negev. It was more arid.
Hold on, wasn't that a bit risky? I mean, what if God's provision didn't reach that far? What if that land wasn't as fertile? He was putting a lot of faith in a promise.
You got it. That's what makes it so powerful. Abraham showed this deep, deep trust in God, even when it meant, seemingly getting the worst deal.
That's a huge lesson. Sometimes letting go, even of something precious, that's an act of faith in itself.
Absolutely. It's counterintuitive, isn't it?
Totally. And you know what? I can't help but wonder, did that act of selflessness, did it have something to do with what happened next? Because right after this, God basically goes, Abraham, you're amazing. Here's an even bigger promise.
You're catching on. Genesis 13.18. God shows Abraham all this land, not just for him, but for all his descendants, forever.
It's because he was willing to trust God when things were good, he unlocked an even greater level of blessing.
That's a great way to put it.
So it's not about the wealth itself, right? It's more like a tool to reveal something about Abraham's character.
Exactly.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. And speaking of tests, what about that whole finding a wife for Isaac saga? Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That's the prime example of wealth used for something way bigger than just, buying fancy things.
For sure. It wasn't just about finding any wife. It was about keeping the line of faith going.
Yeah.
God's covenant promise.
So we're not talking about some spoiled rich kid getting a trophy wife here?
No, not at all. This was high stakes. Matchmaking with the fate of, God's promise hanging in the balance.
No pressure.
Right. And the way Abraham handled it is fascinating. He sends his most trusted servant, not just with riches to, show off, but with very specific instructions. You can read it in Genesis 24.
Oh, I know. Find a girl who gets it, who understands what it means to walk with God, and who will raise our grandkids with the same values.
Right.
He set the bar high. He wasn't just worried about Isaac's happiness. He was investing in the future of God's promise.
That's a really good point.
But tell me, what does all this say about Abraham as a leader? Was he just rich, or was there something more?
That's where it gets really insightful. The sermon dives into this. It says, sure, Abraham was materially blessed, but it's his faith and his leadership that really define him. And you see that leadership in everything he does.
So it's not just the what, it's the HLW, right?
Right.
We see his wisdom with Lot, his generosity, and that incredible trust in God, even when it didn't make sense logically.
Yeah.
It's like a leadership masterclass centuries before business schools even existed.
I love that. A masterclass. And, this kind of leadership, rooted in faith and driven by purpose, it has some serious implications for us today.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us aren't herding sheep or buying land, but we all have resources. We all have influence, right? We could all choose to lead like Abraham.
So whether it's our families, our jobs, our communities, or even just how we manage our time, there's a lot we can learn from him.
So much. It's not about waiting for some big promotion. It's about making wise choices,
Right.
being generous, and trusting God even when things get tough. Now, that's a deep dive I can get behind.
I'm with you, but I have to ask, What are some of the challenges we might face trying to live this way, trying to be this kind of steward?
Ah, that's where it gets real.
Right.
Because let's be honest, living generously, making decisions based on faith, it's not always a walk in the park.
It's not.
No. There are battles to fight, pressures to navigate,
Yeah.
and life throws those curveballs,
Sounds like we've got a lot more to unpack. So, living like Abraham, being that kind of steward, sounds challenging. What are some of the biggest hurdles we might face?
Well, I think, we live in a world that's all about more, bigger, better, faster. It's so easy to fall into that comparison trap.
Oh, totally. Like
Yeah.
you're constantly feeling like you're not enough.
Right.
It's like keeping up with the Joneses, but now the Joneses are on Instagram showing off their perfect lives.
Exactly.
It's tough not to get sucked in, always wanting what you don't have.
And that yearning, that constant wanting, it creates this inner conflict. You might get stewardship intellectually, but emotionally, you're still fighting that urge to accumulate, to have more.
So it's like our hearts and our wallets aren't on the same page.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we move from like scarcity to contentment to being grateful for what we have?
The sermon touches on this. It's all about the heart. We need to shift our focus from what we lack to what we already have.
Oh, that's good.
And it's not just stuff, right? It's about recognizing all the blessings, the relationships, our talents, the opportunities we have.
So instead of focusing on what's missing, we take stock of all the good stuff.
Exactly.
But let's be real, even when we try to be grateful, there's still that pressure from society.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes stewardship tough.
It does. There's this idea out there, that success equals a certain lifestyle. Big house, fancy car.
Designer clothes, the whole 9 yards.
Right. And if you don't fit that mold, you're judged, seen as a failure.
It's like there's a script, and if you don't follow it,
People look at you funny.
exactly. And that fear of judgment, it can be paralyzing. It makes it hard to make choices with your money that actually align with your values.
It really does. You start making decisions to impress others,
Mm.
not because it makes you happy or because it aligns with your purpose.
It's a sneaky trap.
It is.
And then on top of all that, there are those curveballs life throws at you, like
Oh, yeah.
job loss, a medical emergency. Ooh, who knows? It can derail everything.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And when those things happen, it's easy to panic, to fall back into that scarcity mindset.
You start questioning, like, did I do something wrong? Is God not providing?
It's a natural reaction.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate those storms? How do we hold on to stewardship when everything feels chaotic?
Yeah.
That's when faith is truly tested. We have to remember God is with us, even when it's tough, even when we don't understand.
It's about holding on to his promises, right?
Exactly. And leaning on our community, letting others support us, and offering that same support in return.
Yeah.
We're not meant to go through it alone.
We're stronger together.
And, sometimes those tough times, they make us reevaluate.
In what way?
We might need to let go of stuff, simplify our lives, be creative with our resources.
It's like a crash course in resourcefulness.
Right. You discover a strength you didn't know you had.
You come out the other side tougher, more resilient.
Exactly. So even though those trials are hard, they can be opportunities for growth, spiritually and practically. But, let's not forget the good stuff.
Yes, the reward.
The joy, the fulfillment that comes with being a good steward.
Because it's not all doom and gloom, right?
Not at all. When you're living in a way that honors God and helps others, it brings a peace that money can't buy.
It's like a weight is lifted.
Exactly. You're not chasing fleeting things anymore. You've found something deeper.
Something with real meaning.
And that purpose often spills over into your relationships. You start inspiring others to be generous too.
It's like a ripple effect, spreading kindness and making the world a better place.
And you become part of something bigger than yourself. A legacy of love and generosity that lasts.
That's beautiful.
And it brings us back to Abraham, doesn't it? His faithfulness changed everything. It impacted generations.
Shaped history.
And, that's what's so amazing about stewardship. It's not just about managing your finances. It's about realizing that your choices, even the small ones, they matter. They make a difference.
It's about the legacy you leave behind. Not just money, but faith, generosity, compassion. It's about inspiring others to live out their purpose. But let's get practical for a second. We've talked about the why, the what. But how do we actually do this? How do we apply these principles to our everyday lives?
The million-dollar question. It can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
So no need to overhaul everything overnight?
No. It starts with a willingness to take a step, even a tiny one.
So baby steps.
Exactly. And here are a few ideas. First, pray about it. Reflect. Think about your finances, your time, your relationships, and ask God for guidance.
Like a spiritual checkup, see where we're at?
Yes. And then pick one area you want to improve and set a realistic goal. Don't try to do everything at once,
You'll burn out.
for sure.
Correct.
So maybe you decide to give a certain percentage of your income or volunteer somewhere, or just be more thankful for the people in your life.
Just start somewhere.
Exactly. And be consistent and celebrate your progress, even the little wins.
It's a journey, not a race.
Absolutely. And remember, you're not alone in this. Talk to your friends. Find a mentor. Join a group. Find people who'll support you and keep you accountable.
So we've talked about the challenges, the rewards, but I'm kind of curious, did Abraham ever struggle with those, internal battles and external pressures we were talking about?
That's a really interesting question. It reminds us that even Abraham, this hero of faith, he was still human. He had his moments. In fact, the sermon highlights a few times where his faith was really put to the test.
Oh, really? Like what? Give me an example.
Well, there was that time, remember, when there was a famine in the land?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of trusting God to provide, Abraham took things into his own hands.
Oh, yeah. He went down to Egypt, right?
Yep.
And told Sarah to lie about being his wife.
Right. Because he was scared the Egyptians would, kill him for her. Not exactly his proudest moment.
Definitely not. It's like he doubted God and tried to, control the situation.
Yeah, he let fear get the best of him. And it shows us, even Abraham, with all his faith, he could still mess up.
It's a good reminder. We're all human. We're going to stumble.
Yeah.
It's not about being perfect. It's about, getting back up and learning from those mistakes.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes Abraham so relatable. He wasn't this superhuman. He messed up. He doubted. He struggled. But he always came back to God.
He asked for forgiveness and got back on track.
Exactly.
That's encouraging. It means we all have those moments, but God's grace is always there. He can even use our failures, turn them into something good.
He can.
But let's talk about the positive side of Abraham's legacy. What impact did his faithfulness have?
Well, it's huge. His obedience led to the birth of a whole nation, the Israelites. They became God's chosen people. They played a key role in, the whole story of salvation.
Talk about a ripple effect. That one decision to leave his home and follow God, it changed everything.
It did.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the historical impact. Abraham's life is a model for us. It shows us what it means to be a faithful steward. His generosity, his willingness to sacrifice, that unshakable trust in God.
It's inspiring.
It is. And it's not just about the big stuff, the historical events. It's about the daily choices we make, how we use what we have, how we treat others, the values we pass on.
It's about the kind of world we leave behind.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from Abraham is this. Align your life with God's purpose. When you seek his will, that's when you find true fulfillment. That's when you make a real difference.
It's not about building your own little empire. It's about being part of something much bigger.
Yes. Some things that last.
It's a legacy worth working for.
It is. And, as we wrap up, I think it's important to remember stewardship, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
It's a process. We're always learning, always growing.
Exactly. It's not about being perfect. It's about taking those steps, seeking God's guidance, and letting him change us.
Letting him work through us.
Yes. And as we go on this journey, God will give us everything we need to be faithful stewards. We can make a difference, leave a legacy that honors him.
I love that. Well said. And as we finish this deep dive, I want to leave you all with a little challenge. What's one small step you can take this week to be a better steward of your time, your talents, your relationships, whatever God has given you? Because even the smallest act of faithfulness can make a difference. It can create a world that's more just, more compassionate, more full of God's love. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep diving deep into the wonders of faith.